From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And ahead for you today from the K-State College of Agriculture, Marty Draper will report on the state of agricultural research at the university as 2019 comes to a close. And Marty looks ahead to the research objectives that the college expects to pursue in 2020. Then K-State's Chris Little will report on his research on contending with sudden death syndrome in soybeans. He talks about why this disease has become more pronounced in recent growing seasons and about the variety screening work he's conducting to find genetic resistance to SDS. And awaiting with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas, K-State's Gus Vanderhoeven. Plus much more right here on Agriculture Today. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Thanks for tuning in once more for another Agriculture Today from the campus of Kansas State University. Rounding out another calendar year, we're taking a look back and a look ahead at various things agriculture out of Kansas State, and one of those things most assuredly would be research initiatives and achievements out of the College of Agriculture here at the university. We bring by for this visit the Associate Dean of Research for the college, Marty Draper, who, by the way, has just assumed that position permanently after serving as the interim in this capacity the past several months. So congratulations, Marty.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the welcome, Eric.
You bet. So we take a look back at 2019. This may be difficult to quantify, but how would you rate the agricultural research year at K-State?
Well, I think we had a pretty good year. I think we always have good years, but when you look back on the kinds of work that we do, we have a history of incremental improvement in whatever area of research that we're involved with, whether that's in crop production and crop protection or whether that's in animal production and reproduction and nutrition. I think we've seen good research outcomes in each of those areas. And there's a couple of different measures that we look at to determine how well our faculty have been doing, and one of those is the grantsmanship, and they've certainly been bringing in a lot of outside funds to supplement our state funds and allow us to achieve new technologies for Kansas producers, but also their publication rate. And so they're actually being able to close the books on some of these grants and show that they've got results that are standing up to review of their peers.
We talk about this from time to time, but that competitive atmosphere for supportive resources. When we use the word competitive, that may be short-selling just how tough it can be out there.
And it is tough. And I have colleagues at other universities that sit back and look at what we have been able to do at K-State with some envy. When you look at the distribution of competitive funds across the country, we have been very competitive and have done very well in bringing in those funds from federal sources in particular. And some of that's because our faculty produce. They have a good track record, and they have good ideas.
So that said, when you consider this past 12 months and you think about research priorities, and we don't want to be excluding anything because it's all important, but what rises to the top there, do you think?
So clearly the things that we have a long-term commitment to are still the kinds of research that we need to do. But I mentioned earlier about incremental progress that we've made. We're entering a period of time with technology where changes happen very rapidly, and there are big changes, big shifts that occur. And so when we think about that as disruptive change, one of the things that I think is a big challenge for us as researchers is to look at how we can make some substantial improvements beyond just that incremental change. And to do that, We need to build teams. We need to look across the university, not just at the College of Agriculture, but how can we bring in engineering and computer science and social sciences to make sure that these big shifts can have a big impact in people's lives.
And there are numerous examples that would fall under that heading in crop production, livestock production, etc.
What's funny, when I think back on people that will tell me, the world is changing too fast, and then they go sit down in their tractor with the auto steer. Technology is there, and we're taking advantage of it every day, and as long as it comes along incrementally, we hardly notice that we've changed our practices. But, the reality is those things are impacting our lives every day, and GPS technology and robotics and the way we even look at that little smartphone that we hold in our hand that has more computing power than a supercomputer of the 1970s it's pretty amazing, the world that we're living in today.
So can you single out crowning achievements, so to say, in 2019?
Oh, my, crowning achievements. I think the things that we've seen happen have been some very important things for producers in the state. We've released another wheat variety, this one that has an additional gene for resistance to wheat streak mosaic virus, in addition to having a very good disease resistance background for some of those things that we see as those pernicious threats that we see every year. So we can throw a gene into a blank background and it might help you against that one thing, but if everything else schmucks you, there's been no advantage. So I think we've got some great advances there. There's certainly been advances on the livestock nutrition front. I just look at, coming from a plant background, I look with some wonder at the side of campus that's working in animal agriculture. It's not by background. I'm on a learning curve there, and I can really appreciate the differences that they're able to show and the kinds of things that they're able to produce, but also have an understanding of the huge investment that it takes for the university to be able to do that kind of research. You can't do it in a closet.
Without question. It has to be real-life conditions, as much to scale as possible, all the above.
Right. And it doesn't matter what kind of research we're talking about. Scale is important because, we can do pilot research, but if we don't scale it, we don't necessarily know what the real impact of that research could be.
2020 is knocking on the door, Marty. Will there be areas of new research interests under the agricultural umbrella coming forth in this new calendar year?
Well, I think some of that depends on our success in receiving federal grants. But there's a couple of projects that are underway right now I can't talk about very much in detail, but that will be cutting-edge research that within the 5-year time frame of that project, we could see it extending 10 and 15 years and having impacts on all elements of agriculture. So I think really it's an issue of how can we reach out and achieve disruptive change in the agricultural enterprise as a whole.
That sounds ominous. You have to keep that close to the vest for now.
Has not been submitted yet, but we're getting close.
And when you think about how K-State goes about determining priorities for research, how does that work?
Well, all of those priorities are really set within the departments and within the programming areas. There are some groups where we have a larger conversation about it, where, for example, on the plant side where we have variety release. Those conversations provide a lot of input to the researchers to determine where those new issues might be, that they could be looking at new solutions. But every time we have a conversation with stakeholders, we're gaining information about what's important to them. We would not be Kansas State University if we were not talking to the producers across the state.
That happens as a matter of routine, doesn't it?
Just about every time we're out in the countryside and talking to folks across the state, we're listening to what they have to say.
So as 2020 is coming upon us very rapidly now, it should be characterized as a year of potential excitement for agricultural research out of Kansas State University?
Well, I think every year is exciting, but when I look at some of the new technologies that are available, when I look at CRISPR-Cas9 in gene editing, when I look at the discoveries that are coming of new genes that do new things, when I'm looking at how We can look at different production practices to lead to greater profitability for producers. When I'm looking at how the implementation of broadband technology across the state opens new opportunities to fairly remote portions of the state, I think that there's nothing but excitement to have for the future.
And you remain with an open door to stakeholders as we go along. You would like to hear more and more from folks out there who are, in fact, the recipients, hopefully the beneficiaries of agricultural research discoveries here.
Well, and I think one of the tricks when we look at our research enterprise is figuring out how we get that operationalized. Sometimes we have to have an investor that's willing to take the technology and turn it into something that can be useful. Sometimes it just is an issue of the time it takes for people to become comfortable with that idea to make it become their new culture. When we talk on the extension side of the house, we talk about changes in knowledge, behavior, and condition. And really that condition ultimately is the culture that says that we are living that in our daily lives. And we can look back on things. Now, again, I'll reference that cell phone in my hand. 20 years ago, that wasn't the culture. But it has caught up with us. Right. And I think that's true for using a GPS. But technological advances just take a while to find their way into society, sometimes to become affordable, but sometimes for people to feel a full understanding of how it can impact them.
And lastly, and you noted it earlier, but it's worth reiterating, commending that team of researchers in K-State's College of Agriculture. They continue to grind away at a very high level of success. And we can anticipate that as well in 2020.
And the more they work together, the bigger the impacts are they can make.
Very well. Congratulations on the accomplishments the past 12 months and looking forward to the next 12. Marty, in this respect, and thank you for sharing your thoughts right here with us today. Happy holidays to you.
I'm glad to be with you, Eric.
He's the Associate Dean of Research in K-State's College of Agriculture, Marty Draper, with some thoughts on the state of agricultural research at Kansas Land-Grant University as we change over into the new year very soon. Agriculture Today. We'll be back in a few moments. You're listening to the K-State Radio Network.
Agriculture and food systems are the main drivers of the Kansas economy, but must be improved in order to feed the world's growing population. How are we going to do so? Reduce food loss, find ways to preserve grasslands, and help families stretch their dollars. Global food systems is one of the 5 grand challenges K-State Research and Extension is addressing. To learn more, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
Welcome back. You're listening to Agriculture Today. For you soybean producers now, we're going to bring you up to the moment on one aspect of soybean disease research out of K-State's Plant Pathology Department. As Chris Little has joined us once again, research plant pathologist here at the university. And Chris, you will be talking some of this up with soybean growers as the new year comes on. We'll get into that in a few moments. Yeah. One of the key pathogens that you are devoting more than a little time to, sudden death syndrome in soybeans, which has come on strongly in, the last decade or so in Kansas?
Yeah, it's been a steadily increasing problem. We don't have the same level of problem that Illinois or Iowa might have with it, certainly, but we are seeing it more and more and more. And it's a fungal pathogen that lives in the soil, so it's soil-borne. People may have read about it in extension literature. Fusarium virgiliforme, and it is an expanding disease, and it really becomes a problem in healthy-looking fields. So fields that one day look really, really nice at the peak of the season suddenly start to die, start to show symptoms. And so this fungus colonizes the root, and as it's colonizing that root and invades the root tissue, it produces toxins that are translocated or move from the root to the upper leaves, and that starts to give you a chlorosis and yellowing, that is, or necrosis, dead tissue, dying tissue, sort of pattern between the veins. And so it's really one of the most recognizable plant diseases that we have. And again, you'll see it pop up really when things should be kind of pristine or perfect out there. Yeah, and sometimes you can dig up that root tissue and see a little bit of necrosis or browning in the root, maybe a little bit of greenish-blue fungal growth. That's not too common, but you can see some root rot.
Well, what we know for sure is if SDS sets in and really takes hold, it'll ravage yields in a soybean stand.
Yeah, it will. You can have 100% loss, in some infested fields. But usually those losses are much, much, much lower than that. And also there's a relationship between the presence of the nematode, SCN, soybean cyst nematode, and SDS. Those seem to be partners in crime, not always, but very typically partners in crime in the same field, again, sort of hidden below the ground, and so you're not seeing it, but you might see a little bit of a yield drag or a little bit of an effect of the nematode, but the presence of the nematode can open up a pathway for infection by this root fungus.
And what is promoting that infection? Certain weather conditions definitely are at play here, right?
It's a disease that likes a lot of moisture. Optimum moisture, optimum plant growth conditions are perfect for this disease. So whatever the plant likes, the pathogen likes to take advantage of that healthy plant as well.
What has been discussed up to this point about managing against sudden death syndrome? Because it's so dramatic and so quick to set in, it's a very difficult thing for a producer to get one's arms around, isn't it?
Yeah. I think, you either have a problem with it or you don't. And sometimes you'll have a problematic field. And I really encourage producers out there that have seen it pop up maybe in the same place over and over again to get their field tested for the presence of SCN. And that can be done here at K-State. Send in soil samples and get SCN tested for. Waterlogging, heavy soils, soils with poor drainage are going to be more prone for root pathogens like this Fusarium virguliforme, which is the SDS fungal pathogen. And I would also say that areas between the rows or the edges or turns, that sort of thing, where you get some compaction, which can take a lighter soil and make it act like a heavier soil, and also give a little bit of stress, especially at the seedling stage. A stressed seedling leads to a less than healthy plant, and that's not always visible to the naked eye, but it's true. And I think some of our research lately has shown that there's a lot of seedling parameters or seedling health parameters that are associated with SDS disease that we can talk about a little bit here in a minute. And so having healthy seedlings is critical to avoiding this disease.
Got to get off to a good start.
That's right.
Stan. So your research, we did want to focus on that and your research approach here. Talk about that in more detail, if you would, Chris.
Yeah, I think, first of all, cyst nematode makes SDS worse. And so I just want to remind folks that, when you're choosing varieties, most of the labels for seed now have their SCN reaction and even maybe some SDS information. So, definitely try to get some varieties that have good resistance to SCN. Sometimes their SDS rating is hit or miss, to be quite honest with you. And you can really be conscious of that where you've had SDS as a problem before. One of the things that we've been funded by the Kansas Soybean Commission to do is to work on germplasm screening, and more than just germplasm screening, or variety screening, I should say, is techniques that we can use to screen for resistance. Okay, high throughput techniques that we can work with the breeder on and what have you. And there's really different stages of this disease. I mentioned the toxin that causes the foliar symptoms in the top part of the plant, but we also have the root rot phase. So again, this is a root pathogen. It colonizes the roots and sends those toxins up to the top of the foliage. And those two sides of the coin aren't necessarily the same, just like the heads and tails, if you will, of a coin. So when we're screening varieties, sometimes their toxin rating doesn't necessarily match their root rot rating. So there's different mechanisms that are happening there. But, we've screened a bunch of commercial material and a bunch of breeding material using a toxin culture filtrate assay, and we get that chlorosis, yellowing, and necrosis dying tissue that we can rate and compare between one variety and another. And we can screen a lot of material that way and be able to tell the difference between the ones that stay green when we expose it to the toxin and the ones that die and get yellow when we expose to the toxin. So that's good. Now, what's more fun is when we look at the root rot phase of the disease, and we do this in seedlings where we directly inoculate the seed. We roll it up in wet paper towels and incubate it for a while. This is a seed germination type test, and then we can measure seedling vigor characteristics. And what's really interesting is that we measure germination, we measure root length, we measure length of the hypocotyl, and several seedling vigor parameters, and it looks like a lot of those seedling vigor parameters that we measure in this rolled paper towel test associate or correlate really well to disease in the field. So that's sort of a good finding because we can do those rolled towel tests really quickly and be able to look at a lot of varieties and know that the result that we get in that test in the lab gives us information about how a variety might perform in the field. So that's sort of hot off the presses, and I'll be talking more to the Soybean Commission this week on that, and also to anybody that wants to come to the Soybean Expo in Topeka on January 8th, and more detail on SDS there.
Want to stress that Chris will, in fact, be on the program at the 2020 Kansas Soybean Expo. It's in Topeka on January the 8th. So if you'd like to learn more about their approaches to contending with SDS and varietal advancement against this disease, that's a great place to find out more about it. But, Chris, it sounds like you're making headway here in as far as that resistance factor.
Yeah, I think that good screening techniques gives us a tool to find better resistance sources and helps us understand the disease better and piece out the disease better. And that's going to move things along. Another really good relationship we have is with Eric Adey in Rossville, Topeka stations out there, and worked with them a little bit looking at the influence of nutrition. So we found that phosphorus nutrition really helps reduce SDS. So just another good management strategy. Good high nutrition soils are once again going to assist in overall plant health, which should reduce pathogen activity in this case.
It's going to be a multi-layered approach against SDS in soybeans, but you're on the right track, you and colleagues, in so many respects. Chris, we appreciate the update right here, and happy holidays to you and yours.
You too.
Research plant pathologist at Kansas State University, Chris Little, our guest on this part of Agriculture Today. We'll return in a few moments on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128-plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today from the campus of Kansas State University. Eric Atkinson back with you, and with today's agricultural news headlines now, courtesy in part of DTN. A multi-year extension of the biodiesel tax credit was among the major provisions for agriculture in that massive federal spending bill that will fund the government through the end of next September. The House voted 297 to 120 yesterday to clear the $1.4 trillion bill that funds most major federal agencies, and that with a rush to get the Senate to approve the bill before this Friday to keep the government from shutting down. The $1 per gallon biodiesel tax credit is retroactive from the start of 2018 and will run now through the end of 2022. The credit expired at the end of 2017 and created 2 years of difficult challenges for biodiesel producers. Those plants will now reap the gains of recovering 2 years of backdated credits on their production and the next 2 years moving forward. That appropriations bill also includes an additional $1.5 billion in disaster aid funding. That was pushed by Senator John Hoeven of North Dakota, who's the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Appropriations Committee. The $1.5 billion, which had been unspent in 2017, will be added to the $3 billion passed earlier in the year. And the House also included $550 million for the USDA's Rural Broadband Expansion Program called Reconnect. The House had initially approved $605 million, but the Senate did not include funds for the program. A bipartisan push from nearly 50 rural congressmen kept funding for that broadband expansion. The USDA's Gary Crawford offers this update on that program.
In its Reconnect program, a program of loans and grants to bring high-speed internet to rural areas, the Agriculture Department's been in high gear across the country awarding those funds for broadband projects. The latest announcement coming for a project in 2 counties of southwest Iowa, $6.4 million, personally announced by Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue. He told an interviewer before the ceremony,
Congress has appropriated money that we took applications in, and I'm very happy that this part of Iowa is participating in it. We've had great results all over the country, and people are excited about it. I think connecting fields and farms all across the country could be the most transformative thing that we can do.
Already, just over the last week, USDA has awarded funds totaling over $94 million for broadband projects in South Dakota, North and South Carolina, Alabama, and now, of course, southwest Iowa. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Also from Capitol Hill yesterday, the House Ways and Means Committee advanced to the floor the implementing legislation for the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement on a nearly unanimous vote. The panel agreed to favorably report the bill without changes after a mock markup where members reviewed the 239-page legislation. By law, implementing legislation for a trade agreement cannot be amended. The House is scheduled to vote tomorrow on the bill. Senate action, however, will take place in 2020, according to Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, after the chamber finishes the expected impeachment trial of President Trump. Although public comment is underway for proposed changes to the USDA's Environmental Quality Incentives Program, landowners may wonder when they can apply for the program. The USDA's Rod Bain reports.
The public comment period is underway for the interim final rule of the Environmental Quality Incentives Program through February 18th. EQIP has been updated per the 2018 Farm Bill, hence the need for public comment. But this question to Matt Lohr, Chief of the Natural Resources Conservation Service. When should producers and landowners expect the next deadline for EQIP applications?
They haven't announced when the sign-up deadline will be, but folks that are interested can go in and apply, and then states will kind of hold those until the deadline passes, and then they'll be batched and scored. Some states do it once a year, some states do it several times a year, depending on the activity.
State-specific sign-up periods are expected to be announced in the coming weeks, though, and the chief emphasizes
you can apply for EQIP every day of the year
by submitting applications at the local NRCS field office. Producers and landowners can also learn more about EQIP signups by state by visiting their state NRCS website. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
And you're listening to Agriculture Today. With the holidays fast approaching, you shoppers wanting to include beef on the menu may be looking for a little guidance. Scarlett Hagans tells us here that the Kansas Beef Council is working with dietitians and meat departments to help provide the information needed.
Health and nutrition are top of mind for consumers, but can sometimes be a barrier when deciding to purchase beef. However, with more dietitians working in retail grocery, there's an opportunity for meat departments and dietitians to work together to help consumers understand the meat case and the nutritional benefits of beef, enhance food safety, and provide seasonal meal solutions. With this in mind, the Kansas Beef Council is providing consumer-facing holiday resources to 24 registered dietitians and meat departments in Kansas and Kansas City Metro Hy-Vee grocery store locations. These resources aim to help consumers choose the best roast for their holiday needs by providing beef cut recommendations, roasting guidelines, and recipes. Dietitians choosing to lead in-store cooking and tasting demonstrations can draw consumers in with beef's aroma and taste and use this information to engage with them by sharing quick tips on beef's nutrition and versatility. In addition, resource materials placed at the point of sale make it easier for busy shoppers to cook beef at home during the holidays and make it clear they are endorsed by the in-store dietitian. Consumers looking for holiday beef recipes and cooking tips online can find the information they need on the Kansas Beef Council website at kansasbeef.org. I'm Scarlett Hagans.
And here a quick reminder for you crop producers as you are thinking over your farm program participation ahead. K-State's Agricultural Economics Department has posted a trade-off spreadsheet. It compares the potential 2019-2020 agriculture risk coverage county level payments with the price loss coverage payments to aid you in making your program election decisions between now and March the 15th. This spreadsheet includes every state, county, and covered commodity that the FSA has released data for. It can be found on agmanager.info under policy and the 2018 Farm Bill link. There is also an 8-minute video to explain how that spreadsheet works and how to interpret the results table from it. A handy tool for deciding whether ARC or PLC will be your best move, farm program participation-wise, in 2019 and 2020. You can find that tool now at agmanager.info. In a moment, Gus Vanderhoeven and Stop, Look, and Listen here on Agriculture Today.
When you are in need of timely, reliable, and trusted information, K-State Research and Extension is here. Whether it's organizing people, information, or resources, they have the necessary tools. Community comes first for K-State Research and Extension. For more information and to connect with your county's extension agents, visit www.ksre.k-state.edu.
This is Agriculture Today. Stop, look, and listen.
It's time for me to go and get a Christmas tree on our farm.
That's Gus Vanderhoeven of Kansas State University with comment on life in rural Kansas.
I owe Eric an apology. I told him I would not recite or quote more poetry. But I changed my mind, and before this is over and done with, I will read one more poem, a song. It's not long, but it spoke to me as it spoke to and was experienced by a dear friend. As we get in closer and closer to Christmas, also a family celebration with things to do and to get ready for, we miss those who have died during the past year, even more so those who died recently and left us behind. I've looked around me. Friends and family have gone on their long journey, never to come back. Simply said, to die is part of life. But it's especially at this time, the holiday season, when we celebrate and hold on to its real meaning, that it takes courage to breathe deep and say, yes, we miss you, but we will celebrate togetherness and the birth of Christ. It's time for me to go and get the Christmas tree on our farm. There are the old legends of the selection process and the cheer of bringing the tree home. In the garage near the shop door, I've stapled cards. Once glued to packages arriving with UPS or FedEx at Christmas time. The packages sent with love had glued on top a Christmas scene, a card. The one I often look at shows a farmhouse at dusk with snow and light shining through the windows. A team of horses pulls a sled with the chosen Christmas tree tied to the sled. I will cut mine and haul it home on the pickup. Of course, the tree, a gorgeous cedar, will be way too big. It always is. But at home, after soaking it overnight, I will carefully trim it after I place it on the stand. Once I'm done with that, and I've brought the tree inside and decorated it with the old family decorations, no one will recognize the tree as a field cedar. One of many, but this one was chosen. When I placed the top, I will remember that many, many years ago, after I had been in an accident and after slowly recuperating, was able to stand again and carry some weight. I lifted my youngest daughter on my shoulders, and she placed the very top of the tree. It was kind of scary, as we had to lean in to reach the top. Her expression is concentration. It's a long time ago. She was small. The photo taken of that moment reminds me, but I am reminded whenever I place the top. Then there are the ornaments carefully unwrapped and hung in place. They all hold meaning and memories. And the older we get, the more memories we have. Some we hold as our own. Others we talk about and laugh at. It is good. The song, A Different Kind of Christmas, by Mark Schultz. Snow is falling Christmas Eve. Lights are coming on up and down the street. The sounds of carols fills the air, and people rushing home, families everywhere. Putting candles in the windows, lights upon the tree. But there is no laughter in this house, not like there used to be. There's just a million little memories that remind me you're not here. It's just a different kind of Christmas this year. In the evening, fires glow, dancing underneath the mistletoe. A letter left from Santa Claus won't be the same this year in this house, because there's one less place set at the table, one less gift under the tree, and a brand new ache to ask their place inside of me. I'm unwrapping all these memories, fighting back the tears. It's just a different kind of Christmas this year. There is voices in the driveway. Family is right outside the door. And we'll try to make this Christmas like the ones we've had before. As we get around the table, I see joy on every face. And I realize what's still alive is the legacy you made. It's time to put the candles in the windows, the lights upon the tree. It's time to fill the house with laughter like it used to be. Just because you're up in heaven doesn't mean you're not near. It's just a different kind of Christmas this year. I don't know, but as I've grown older, the idea of heaven has changed for me. A friend once said, "Gus, heaven is on earth. It's what we do here, what we make of our life. Whatever it means for us, we know what we mean. Peace." Our Christmas letter for this year is both Annika and I reading in front of a good fire in the open fireplace. And above the fireplace hangs a painting of the old country, a winter scene with snow on the massive beech trees and a horse-drawn wagon coming up the lane. The driver is walking beside the horse to make the load lighter. In the low clouds in the distance is some reddish pink. It's turning evening. Time to go home. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all.
Gus Vander Hoeven of Kansas State University with his weekly commentary on life in rural Kansas. That's our time for today. As always, thanks for tuning in. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.